Today, we're going to be talking about three things that the Chicago Bulls must do in the next step of their rebuild. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Buzelis slam dunks in games, because in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about three things that the Chicago Bulls must do as they enter phase two of their rebuild. So the NBA draft is over and NBA free agency is over. Yes, you could still go out and sign some free agents, but right now I think it's pretty much set here with what the Chicago Bulls have on their roster. And so now I think it's going to be moving into phase two, and these are going to be rinse and repeat things that the Bulls are going to have to do really every season moving on. They're really going to have to lock in on these three things to maximize this team and get them back to being a contender. And so the first thing that the Bulls are going to have to do now in this next phase is really lock in on the player development. I think that this is going to be everything. And I think that player development really breaks down into three aspects. You have to be able to develop the young core that you already have on the team. You have to be able to develop the incoming rookies. And then on top of that, you're really going to have to invest in the Windy City Bulls. I think that that is going to be very important. And so let's go ahead and let's start with the rookies, because with Caleb Wilson and Dalen Swain coming in, I think that it is expected that these guys are going to be building block pieces. With Caleb Wilson, look, we're hoping that he becomes the franchise player for us here with all the things that he can do on the court. And I think that Dalen Swain is going to be a great player for the Chicago Bulls. Heck, he might even turn into a superstar. We'll see what happens. But look, in player development here, when you're bringing in these rookies, look, it doesn't matter what you already have on the roster. If you're not able to maximize these rookies and get them to their best self, you're always going to be, I think, a step behind as far as getting your team back into just real contention. And so it's going to be important to see what this team does with the rookies here, because it's not just about working on their strengths. You have to find a way for them to get better at their weaknesses. And so that is going to be key. And so look, if you're not that good with the point of the attack defense, then you need to get better there. If you're not that good with the handles, you've got to sharpen that up. If you're not that good as far as knocking down three-point shots, you've really got to work on these things. And so this is where everything is at for the Bulls. You have to be able to really maximize the player development aspect. I think this is something that Bryson Graham has shown before in his past stops. And so I think that this is where things are really going to change for the Chicago Bulls moving forward. So that's the first part. You have to be able to maximize the rookies that you have brought onto the roster. And so the next thing, as far as maximizing talent, you have to also think about your young core. And so with your young core, these are going to be players that are already on the roster that have shown some flashes, and they just need to continue to keep tightening up their game. And so Leonard Miller, with what he was able to do, obviously the Bulls are interested because they picked up his team option. You have Josh Giddey and the way that he has been trending upward. So he's heading into his sixth season. I don't think that he is anywhere near hitting his peak. And then also too, Noah Asenge, right? This is going to be year two, but it's really year one for him because he didn't get a chance to play with the shoulder injury. And then you have to think about players like Rob Dillingham. And so this is certainly going to be important now because these are players that are established in the NBA. They've already shown you something. And so now, can you get these players to the next level? This is certainly going to be important for Bryson Graham as he continues to build out this roster. Again, you have Josh Giddey heading into his sixth season. Can he become an even better shooter? Does he get even better on the defensive end with Modest Buzelis? Does he get better defensively? And can he turn more into a three-level scorer? And then with Noah Asenge, really we're going to find out everything about Noah Asenge. Can he be a guy that plays the 4, the 5, the 3 with this size that he has now? He's listed at 6'11". Has he gotten stronger? Has he gotten even more comfortable with his jump shot as well? So we find that out. And then with Rob Dillingham, look, you're looking at a player that was a former, lottery pick here. Can he turn into the type of point guard that the Minnesota Timberwolves really saw when they drafted him? Now he's over here with the Chicago Bulls. He's showing a little bit of flashes towards the end of the season, but can he be a piece for you? And so you have to work on developing that young core. And then next, it's about investing into the Windy City Bulls. And so, look, I've talked about this before with the Miami Heat and the situation that they have where they're able to find these undrafted gems and they get people off of their G League team as well in their summer league program. And they're able to get players that eventually are playing some major minutes for them, or they might even carve out a major role for them. And I think that that is also something that this team is really going to have to invest in. And I think that they're going to be off to a great start when you take a look at the two-way contracts that they have here. And so Toby Awaka and then also to Jalen Sellers, I think that they're going to really show out here in the summer league. And look, you're looking at players that really, I think, fill needs for this roster, because with Jalen Sellers, we talked about this before, this guy is a legit scorer. He led the Big East in scoring. And then also, too, at the G League Combine, he had 20 points and 5 rebounds, so played very well there. And then with Toby Awaka, this guy's a rebounding machine. And then when you talk about somebody that you need to come in and be a major role player, he possibly could do that. We talked about the fact that he was the Big 12 sixth man of the year. And so that is exactly what you're looking for if you're Bryson Graham here. And so you really have to invest here in the Windy City Bulls. I think it has to mirror what you're trying to do with the big club as well. And so I think that you're going to see that change with this team as they turn it around and turn into some legit contenders. And so the next thing here for the Chicago Bulls that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to really go into some deep roster evaluations. Like that obviously must continue. I think that that is going to be one of the important things here for the Chicago Bulls, because you need to figure out really who is going to be with your roster for the long term, who is with this roster right now, until you can maybe turn, something into maybe a flipped asset or something like that. So the evaluations have to go on for the Bulls here, because I certainly don't think, they're anywhere near where they want to be at this point in time. And so when you're taking a look at the roster and you're looking at these guys, and so, some of these guys we've mentioned before, like a Trey Jones, like a Jalen Smith, I think that the way that they were able to play down the stretch, I think that one could say that, look, there could be some teams that could be interested in trading for these players. Do you go ahead and do you pick up the phone and trade these players off? Do you keep these players as you continue to build out the roster? That's something that Bryson Graham's going to have to think about. Also too, you're going to have to take a look at even the players that you've just signed, like Norman Powell, Zach Collins, Nick Claxton. And I say that because, look, I don't think that they're going to be a part of the long-term build here, because if you look at the contracts with Norman Powell and then you also look at the contract there with Zach Collins, those are very tradable contracts. Even Nick Claxton, even though, he's coming over on that Nets contract, it's something that's still very tradable. And so you can expect there's going to be some shifts to the roster. And that means that also, too, he's going to have to still take a look at Patrick Williams, which I think that, look, we already kind of know what that situation is, but he is going to have to evaluate and see what he's going to have to do there, along with Isaac Okoro. So, just taking a look at players that Bryson Graham is basically taking on that he didn't either draft or didn't bring them to the roster. And so that is going to continue. And I think that as roster evaluations continue, I think that you're going to probably see more activity for this team as they go along at the NBA trade deadlines. Like, I don't think that you're going to see NBA trade deadlines anymore where the Bulls are quiet at this point in time. And so that's something to take a look at with the roster evaluations. And then lastly, I think it comes down to really just, I think, building the foundation for your franchise. And this is where you're talking about the winning standards. This is where you're talking about the team identity. This is where you're talking about winning culture. Like, I think that that is probably the most important thing here, is like you have to have a solid ground to build on. And it starts, I think, from the top of the organization with the way that Bryson Graham and these guys really go about this thing as far as, building it out with the structure and everything else. And I think it's going to trickle right down to the players and coaches and everything else. And so you want to get those winning standards going. And this is why I like the fact that you bring in a player like Norman Powell. I think that that is huge for this team. You bring over players that have that type of experience and things like that. You bring over a player, or not a player, but a coach in Tiago Splitter, that yes, he didn't win an NBA championship as a coach, but he's done it as a player, and he's been with an organization that really has set a standard with the San Antonio Spurs. And so you're hoping that that comes over a team identity, right? So you want to now start to take a look at just your playing style. What are the standards that you want with that? The physicality, the way that you're going to approach offense and things like that. Like that is certainly going to be important with this team. And just again, the winning culture, man. Like you have to get to a point where you are looking at winning all the time. You're thinking about it. It's competitive in practices. It's competitive in shoot arounds. It's competitive at the games. Like everything has to switch here. This has to be your foundation for this team. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking about. Once again, we talked about three things here. I said that building the right foundation, once again, with your winning standards, your team identity, and then also to the culture that you're building up. And then next, we talked about roster evaluations. This is certainly going to be important for the Chicago Bulls, and I think that this is something that's going to continue. You can expect for Bryson Graham to continue to listen, to calls that are coming in, and also too, he's sitting there and he's looking at this roster and he's going to try to figure out, okay, what do I need to do with this roster to get it to my long-term kind of vision for this team and getting it back into being a real contender in the Eastern Conference. And so this is certainly going to be important when you're taking a look at these players that are already on the roster. And then next, we talked about player development. I think that this is everything for this team. Look, no matter who you bring in, who you trade for, and everything else, you have got to make sure that you maximize the talent. And it's not just what you're drafting. It's not just what's on the roster, but also, too, when you're looking at your Windy City Bulls, that is going to be important because, look, players do get injured from time to time. You're going to have to trust players. You're going to have to put them into situations to where they can play some major minutes. And you might just find, just some gems there. And so that is certainly important. I think that when you're trying to really change the standard for your team. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking about those 3 points and if there's anything else that you would like to add. And look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.